If you've ever asked yourself, where should I fish for bass in spring, or how do I catch bass in spring, you're in the right place. In this video, I'm taking you out in the water for 2 full days, breaking down exactly where to fish for bass in spring, how to locate them fast, and the key adjustments you need to make to catch more fish this time of year. But this isn't just another generic spring bass fishing video. I'm sharing secrets I've learned over 2 decades as a pro bass fisherman and guide. I'll walk you through real-time decision making, show you the best spring fishing spots, and explain what baits for bass in spring actually work so you can catch fish in any condition. And here's the deal. If you skip around, you're going to miss the key details that turn tough spring days into big bass days. Stay with me through the entire video, and by the end, you'll know exactly where to find bass, what they're feeding on, and how to put more fish in the boat this spring.
That's pretty crazy. It's back-to-back cast. You know, there was a warming trend, muddy up here. The water was way up. It's kind of dropped out of the bushes a little bit. And it was 25 last night, 31 the night before. Cold. Water temp was getting close to, upper 50s here. Back down to 51 in here today. And that's a pair. That's a male, pretty clearly a male and female in there. Always makes me think, in the springtime, I think that the spawning is controlled more by the length of the days, by the moon phase. They love to spawn around the full moon, and that's next week. I mean, there was nothing in here a couple days ago. I checked it. This is one of my favorite areas. Come through here, and now there's a pair here, and it's in the morning. It's still cold. I mean, they're moving up, so it's, I don't know, fishing, you never know. You just go fishing, see what the fish tell you. But that's pretty clearly a pair right there. When I see a male and a female right there, that tells me other areas around here, spawn's starting to happen. Now, the springtime, what I'm looking for, man, this is the classic little pocket. It's a big cove, and there's a bridge here, so in the back end, it's kind of sealed off. It stays muddier, it stays warmer back here when it starts to warm up, because it's kind of like its own little lake. And there's a big long run, a big flat out there. But look at this pocket. All these bushes right here, it's a small little area, but a lot of cover right here. I mean, you can see when the water's up, you could have half dozen, 15, 20 fish even spawn in here. Perfect little pocket to check quick. If I pick up 2-3 bites in here, then obviously there's a big wave. I'm gonna fish a lot more of it versus going to the very back of like a big cove and then looking for, fishing around, taking an hour to get through. These little small pockets like this can be little hot spots, and sometimes there's just a little wave that'll pull into one pocket like this and 3 other pockets won't have them. But this is exactly what I'm looking for in the springtime. Flat, tons of cover. If this is just seawall or bare bank, not a lot of place to hide, but I can look in here really quick and say, man, if there's a wave coming up, this is the type of spot that where they'd be. All the bushes, all the cover. Rocky. Chunker. Man, it's a really good spawning pocket. Another spot that I've caught him in the spring before. I catch him on that riprap coming in, I catch him on point coming in, and then all of a sudden I get back to the back, nothing. I see shad moving around, but not back there yet. As soon as I get back up to steeper banks, catch one. That one was off the shore. It wasn't up on timber like they were spawning in a bush. It was down the steeper bank. So that tells me they're pushing back. They're not back here, but it's a process of elimination. You get in the very backs of it. That's where you know they're going to spawn. If they're not back, you keep working your way out. These steeper banks, it's only depth here. I mean, this is super flat. And then they'll be on the points leading in. And if they're not there, it's colder. You keep working your way back out. But in spring, it makes it pretty easy. If you know where they spawn, or you can look on the map and you can look at the cover and see how flat it is, you know the type of areas they'll spawn. They're around there somewhere. The bucks, it seems like you get those up shallow around the bushes. They're looking to make nests here real soon. The females, of course, are on this a little bit steeper stuff, really close. It's like an old middle school dance, junior high dance. The guys are on one side, the girls on the other side of the room, but they're pretty close to each other. And they're working on getting closer. You saw I set right before that. Anytime in the springtime, they're making beds, they're getting territorial. Anytime you feel a bump, you think maybe you had a bite, you better throw right back in there, because a lot of times it's a fish. He's just swatting at it, chasing it out of there, hitting at the tail or something. You see a ripped off tail on that, throw right back in, boom. And then the other thing, anytime you catch a male in the spring, you better throw back in, because there's a decent chance there's a bed there, which means there's a female, and you catch the big one after you catch the buck. Man, they always have those bright ruby red lips in the springtime. The other thing is, this one's so pale, everybody always says, oh man, you tell they're just moving up. They're just moving up because they're fresh, they came out of deep water. Man, to me, that is the biggest myth and crock of BS in bass fishing. Guess what? In the summertime, how many fish did you catch out deep? 20, 30, 40 feet of water come out white. They come out dark as can be, right? The water's mud. It's muddy up here. They adjust it like chameleons. They fade out when it's muddy water. When it's bright, when they're around weeds, they get greener. When it's really dark weeds, they're almost black. They're more green than black almost. The fish aren't just moving up. Like they don't just change color because they moved up. Bunch of BS. More fishing BS. If you're catching fish that are white in the spring, it's because you're fishing in muddy water. Pretty plain and simple. All right, so we look at this cove right here. This looks like a classic spawning cove to me as well. It's a pretty big one. You look right at the mouth here, you got a big lone willow tree in the water. To me, that's like an isolated piece of cover on the point. Always check that. That's a fish moving in or out. That's a classic staging spot. Then we look on the right side here, you can tell it's flatter. The bank's real flat, it comes out flat. There's not much cover on it through the first half of it. That's real sparse. I'm not gonna spend much time over here. A couple isolated laydowns maybe have them. But then I look in the back, and then I see flooded bushes back here, and then it goes to flooded willow trees. And to me, that's going to be where the main spawning is. That's where the action is. If they're spawning, that's where I'm going to flip a lot of those, or spinner bait, bladed jig, all that around back there. And then on the left side, you see that's a pretty steep hill right there. That tells me the creek hugs that side, so there's a ditch coming in. That steeper bank, when there's cold fronts, they're probably going to move back to that, out of the shallows. When they're starting to move in the spring, that's where I'd throw like a frit side, like a square bill type crankbait, crank that, or throw a jig on some deeper timber when there's cold front or before they move back. But this has everything you need right here. You have an isolated piece of cover on the point, you have a nice channel bank on the far side, and then a spawning area right here. For me, anytime, the pre-spawn, so which in the south here is mid-February, late February through March into early May, this has a combination of all the factors that I'm looking for in a spawning pocket. They're in here somewhere, especially and I know if I see the shad breaking around, which I've already seen, that tells me there's definitely gonna be some fish in here chasing around. Let's see how thick this is here. The one thing, the water level is dropping right now, so these fish are hopefully pulling out. The problem is, you can see when the water gets high, a lot of cover, too much of a good thing. They can spread out and get too many spots. What I ideally like is, like at the entrance of the cove, where there's only like the outside layer of bushes or willows are wet. There's just one row of trees that are wet. Then they have to be on those. And I only like about a foot, 2 foot on those. I don't want them way back up behind it. I want like the outside or anything that lays down or overhangs. I want that to have about 1.5 to 2 feet. They can spawn in that, get up there and feed in that. You start getting 3 feet plus, they get back behind it. It's just not as efficient to fish it. They can spread out all over the place. So depending on the area you're fishing and how steep the bank is, you want to find places where, like I said, if there's just a single row of cover, it really lines them up, makes them more accessible. Oh, geez. Female, not a huge one, but a decent fish right there. I don't know if you saw that one, but that fish came at me so hard that I literally, the rod came on my hands, the reel did at least. It was able to hang on. I can't believe that I got that fish. Lucked out on that one. But we fished through all this stuff here. It's so random. And then we come, the ditch that I was talking about, that steep side, it makes a point over here. The ditch comes out. There's a couple isolated piece of buckbrush here, and then there's willow trees right there. And of course on that point, you know, all this where the just outside of the creek channel, the little ditch, that's another little key spot. That piece of cover right on the point, and in the very back where that ditch, you know, where all this stuff, all the shallow water turns to deep a little bit again, high percentage areas. This has mud back here too. This water, I don't know, maybe there's 6 inches of visibility, something like that. That makes it a lot easier. You know, if there's a deeper cove farther down the lake, you'd be looking at live scope, but out in the middle of it, they'd be chasing shad. When it's mud like this, the upper ends of the lake, the very backs of creeks, I prefer in the spring, just because you know it's going to put them around the bank and obvious pieces of cover. And still, you know, that's another clue to me. It's not the spawn bite yet. The water, the sun is beating down. It started out at 51. It's like 55 now. In a couple hours time, it's warming up fast. But you know, this fish, this on a little point here, mini point next to the ditch, it could be spawning. But to me, that's another stage. Or that's a point fish, more steeper bank stuff, more pre-spawn versus spawn fish. Whoa. Chunker. Man, I just had a bite. I missed when I power pulled down over there, and man, I know one hit it. I thought I had one hit right back there, and it's just how it happens in the spring. Like I said, they're just kind of territorial. They're swatting at it, going after it. You work the area real good, and sure enough, there's a pretty good one. I was ready to boat flip that one, and then a little bigger than I thought. But I mean, it's warmed up. It's middle of the afternoon. The water temp started out at 51. It was 25 degrees this morning. It's up to 56, almost 57 now. So seems like the time they're going to be moving up today, and it's supposed to get a warm rain coming. Man, this week, you can just feel it happening. It's happening. Now, if you look past me in the back here, this is a vast expanse. I mean, there's just willows flooded all over. It's the back of a very large creek. So when do I like to fish that? That's, you know, when I'm fishing a tournament or on a weekend and the lake is really crowded, going all the way back. The maps aren't good in the back of those creeks. It's just hard to figure out. I mean, everything's between like a foot and 2 foot, and then there'll be little ditches and stuff. It's a bear just even getting back there. The nice thing is it's intricate. It's going to take you a couple hours to fish a lot of times, and there'll be tons of dead water, and there'll be some section that's loaded up. Every once in a while the whole back end's loaded, but usually it's going to be like with some section the water's clear, a little deeper, harder bottom, something like that. So you're going to spend time, and you can find it's kind of like wildcatting for trying to strike it rich on oil or gold or something. Man, when you hit the mother lode, it's untapped, you have it all to yourself, but you can also kill like a whole afternoon and not catch anything. So if you have a lot of time and it's been a warming trend, you know, the fish are on the bank and stuff, it's a great place to go explore. If you just have like an afternoon, it's probably, you know, in a few hours, it's not the best way to spend it, unless you want to go try to look out and the lake's really crowded. I don't know if you can see this totally up on the shore, those dark spots up there, but this is just, it's just grass, like literally like yard grass, pasture grass. The water's been up for a while now, and that stuff's kind of getting rotten and dying off. I'll tell you what though, when the lakes draw down in the fall, if in the, you know, the summer, if they're down low enough, and grass and vines and weeds, I don't care what it is, when that newly floods, especially this has a bunch of buckbrush and willows and stuff, so the bass use that. But when there's that flooded grass and there's no trees and stuff, no bushes, man, they love to get in it. When it's first flooded, I like it when it's still sticking out of the water a little bit. You see it clumpy and stuff, you can kind of crawl up over the top of it. You know, swimming a worm's real good in that. You can do the, take the speed boss, you know, swim a worm, crawl it over it. You know, the fluke style baits like the jerk shad and stuff. Swim jigs are real good, come through it. That's really good. Once it's been up there a while and it starts to rot, they don't seem to like to get around it as much. And, you know, it loses some of its appeal. But man, anytime that the back of the creeks, when that grass floods, pockets that have it and stuff, main lake stretches, I don't care. They love to get in that stuff. Look for it in the springtime, pre-spawn through post-spawn. And then when the shad spawn, if the water hasn't come up yet, it floods, you get those big spring rains, shad spawn, man, they get all over it. So always keep that yard grass in mind. Shad spawn, check out the frog too, and buzzbaits, man, they love to get in that stuff. That was a big one. Oh, I was missing fish on the jig, and like the hook was starting to get sprung, so I tied on a new one, put a brand new one on, and retied and put it up the line. God dang it. What happened there? That was a big one of some sort. Maybe it's a bowfin or something. Man, clean break there. I don't know how I cut off a big section of line. Break off on the hook set. God dang. That's I don't know, as the afternoon's gone on, it's warmed up and they're around the cover, but they're not in it, you know, like just straight up flipping won't get them. So what I'm trying to do is flip in there with a jig, and I'm using you know, a bladed jig, a swim jig, some, and a regular jig, flip it in, and I just soak it for a second and then swim it out. All those ones allow you to swim it, and some of the bites are on the initial fall, but if they're all bedding, you know, they'd all be right there. And then a lot of them though are swimming it out, you know, on the way out. So they're kind of cruising around there, looking where to build beds, but they're not actually locked right on. And that's where the jig, you know, you get the two retrieves. You kind of get the swim and retrieve, and the you know, the yo-yo, the vertical drop. So like I said, bladed jig, swim jig, or regular jig, throw it in there, let it go to the bottom, yo-yo it a couple times, or drag it through where you think the fish might be holding in the bush or around it or the willow, and then swim it back halfway to the boat. And you'll figure out if the fish are kind of locked on the beds, real specific, or they're kind of around them. You know, and the truth is, a lot of days they're a little bit of both. They're kind of in it and around them. So that's where swimming it back, you get some of those flipping fish, some of those swimming fish. You get kind of double duty. And the really cool thing about that, you know, if you're fishing and you have a buddy and you say, hey, I'll throw a spinnerbait in front here, and then you throw a jig, you flip behind me, you leave all those flipping fish. If you really want to back end your buddy, you do this. You're going to get the flipping fish and the swimming fish. You can be hard on them. So, I mean, I personally wouldn't do it, but maybe somebody like you might want to do it to, say, like a brother or something who's like just talking a bunch of smack in the back. I mean, you might think about it. see how psycho they are, how fast they swim when you hook them like that in the shallows. Man, I don't know if it's going to show up on camera. Right before that, though, just up the shore, I saw one minnow flick, like a shad skip on the surface. I mean, shad they're not like mullet or something that come up to the surface and jump. You see one come up to the surface, something moved it. It could be a crappie or a gar swimming through, turtle, God knows. But man, when you see like that one, I made like 2 casts and didn't get a bite and thought, man, just whatever. And then sure enough, the next cast I catch that one. Always keep your eyes peeled for that. Man, you see shad move in the shallows. Even if it's a single one, something's chasing them. I don't know how many times I've seen one shad move, throw right to that spot, and you catch fish there. It's getting late in the day and the fish starting to bite. The water warms up, it gets right. The problem is the sun gets low. Look how far my shadow is out there. These fish, I don't know if you ever pay attention when like a bird, like a heron or an eagle, something like that flies over, how they all spook. Man, they get when they're in shallows like this, spawning and around bushes, they get freaked out by shadows that pass overhead. Be really careful where you're casting your shadow. Like if you're coming up to a big laydown or something like that that looks like a juicy spot, if your shadow gets on it before you get there, I don't care if you're being stealthy with your trolling motor and stuff, man, you're gonna spook those fish. So be really careful late in the afternoon or first thing in the morning when your shadows are long. You put it on these shallow spots. I mean, my one's like almost 20 feet in front of the boat now. You can easily spook these fish in the shallows without even knowing it. Now, as opposed to some of those pockets we were fishing before, how they were short pockets, had a steep bank, and then all of a sudden there was a, willows or bushes or something laydowns in them. This one has random cover, and the one corner right here, it looks good. There's one little group, and maybe you find them, but most of the shore is pretty open. You see the clay, it's kind of eroded. A little bit more, it's the main run of this big creek arm. You can get random spawners, and if they're on real clear stuff, like it's every big lay down or something like that, or bushes on points, yeah, that can work. But in general, it's not as good. You want the pockets where there's kind of a isolated area or a bunch of cover in one little spot there. It seems like you get a collection. When I just get a long run like this and there's just scattered stuff all here and there, only time that's good is there again if there's a lot of fishing pressure and people are beating it up. Sometimes that more random stuff doesn't get as picked over. But in general, if I'm looking on a map and it's on a Tuesday and there's nobody on the lake, I'm like, man, that's not the prime area I'm going to start on. I want those pockets to have the ice, more concentrated cover, not just real random stuff that's kind of not a real defined pocket and not a whole lot of cover to hold a lot of fish in one area. I say that in this section right through here. Now this looks pretty good. There's one little, this kind of like a half pocket. It's just kind of a turn in the main run. It does look like we should get bit through here. The rest of it though is real scattered. And the other thing I will say is it's not an area where you catch a lot of fish, but those random laydowns and stuff up and down the creeks there, it's a good spot to catch just a random big one. If there's one great big tree, a lone one, not everybody and their brothers going up and down it. That's something that's just kind of isolated where big fish can live. So you can catch a big one doing that sometimes, but it's typically not how you get your numbers. The one right there. Oh my God. Followed right to the boat. I was checking my line for a bad spot. It's real super slow. The fish followed right to the boat. Oh God. All right, so back at it. This place looks familiar because it is. Yesterday, we had the sun beating down. The water temperature really warmed up. Last night it was kind of cool, but the clouds moved in. It's going to rain tonight. It's supposed to be upper 60s late afternoon, so warming up. But it's not. The sun's not going to beat down, so it won't warm up the mud. I'm not sure we'll see that big influx, but we're going to get a warm rain overnight tomorrow. A lot of times that warms up the water. But anyway, starting off the morning, come back to the same spot that I fished before. I'm not going to fish all the same areas, but this is a little pocket where I missed a couple, lost a couple, and had a few bites. I like to start off the morning in a spot like that and just quickly review, see if things have changed. If I come through here and yesterday I got bucks and I get all females today, that tells me to kind of move it up. If I get nothing, it tells me, okay, maybe it's cooled down, they're moving back out, or maybe I caught the only ones that were there, that kind of active ones. So it gives me a pulse where I can start the day somewhere that I have confidence in, and I can get a feel for kind of what's happening. And then from there, I want to go run new water. So if more big ones have moved in, then I'm going to look for real similar areas and run those. If there's If I don't get bit, that tells me I totally have to run new water probably, because you know, that you just go through and you catch the active ones, so repeating yourself doesn't work. Or I may need to move back out to deeper, like what we're doing earlier in the day, you know, the steeper stuff. So it gives you a pulse of what's going on. So we'll start there, and then we'll run around, try some new water, look at some more water, see what's happening. Well, that didn't take long to figure out. Not the same as yesterday afternoon. The sun was beating down, the water warmed up. If you remember, we caught them on kind of the lead-in stuff in the morning, and then they got active late in the afternoon in the shallower stuff. Sometimes it gets warm enough, and then they move up there and they make their move. They're going to come up and spawn, and they're going to hang out no matter how cold it gets, unless it gets really, really cold. Didn't happen overnight, doesn't appear to be. Went through a pocket here where I had 3-4 bites yesterday, did not even have a single bump. Water temp is down from, it started off yesterday about 51, went up to almost 60, and is back down to 51 this morning. So that tells me that, you know, that heating, that was just an afternoon bite. So we're going to go run more of those lead-in spots, try that, and then hopefully the sun comes out a little bit today as it warms up a little bit. I think the shallow activity will pick up. The one thing about spring fishing, it's the most variable, it's always changing. So that's good and bad news. If you're not catching them, you're literally a couple degrees of water temperature away, or just moving spots, changing your location just a little bit to running into a big collection of fish. You might go through an area where it only caught little bucks one day, you come back an hour later or the next day, all females will have moved up, and you go from catching 1-pounders to everything averaging like 3 pounds and bigger. Or you can just totally have it where you're catching it and you think you've got it totally figured out, and then all of a sudden it cools off the next day, you get a cold front or the water level drops, something like that, and you go from being a hero and just blowing it out like you see guys doing spring tournaments to struggling the next day. So always keep that in the back of your mind, that hey, things are always changing. Try to understand why these fish are there that day, and when things change, if it gets colder or warmer, if the water goes up or down, where they're going to move to, because they are on the move in the spring and it's always changing. The next big bite's right around the corner. Now banks have less cover on the shore. You can see like this one here, there's docks and not all that brush and willows and stuff like we were fishing before. Docks can really be a great spot for bass to spawn in the spring. It's a great cover. These floating style ones, those black floats, they get, I don't know if they warm, you know, and they hold heat. That's what some people say. And you'll see fish up sunning around them though. They sit up high in the water column, sit in the shade there, dart out, chase stuff. So the floats, running a bladed jig or swimming a swim bait along the side of those can be really good in the spring as fish wait to move to the bank. And then where they spawn, so in pre-spawn, a lot of times I'll look around the front of the dock and just go pull down parallel to the sides, put it up in the boat lifts and stuff. Spawn time, where the walkways come out and meet the back of the dock, a lot of times they move to there. So pitching a jig, throwing a bladed jig, skipping something in there, that's good right before they spawn. And then the fish like to spawn under the walkways, under the cables, on the corners of the dock, if there's any brush piles and stuff around there. But the action, basically all of it, you notice the trend, it's behind the docks. You know, if the docks are sitting out here in 80 feet of water or something, not that good. They'll spawn sometimes right in the shore. But the ones, a lot of times, you get a little bit of depth on the dock, say 6 to 10 foot, and the back of it, you know, is that 6 to 0, a lot of 2-4 foot range. That's where they love to spawn. So when I'm checking spawning fish in the spring, when I'm looking around for those, I'm fishing behind the docks. Skip it underneath the walkways. You know, they use the shade. A lot of times the females will sit there, and then the males will build their nest up there. So check the back of the docks in the spring. I think you're going to find those to be better than actually the front of them. And it didn't take long to figure out this side is dead. So we came over here. A big thing to consider in the spring is the wind. Water, the warmer water, the stuff that heats up, it rides on the top. So the water is really warm at the top, and it gets cooler as it goes down. Gentle winds like we have today will push that top layer from one side to the other and kind of pool up or group up that warm water. This side, we have a little south breeze today. It's starting to blow a little bit more. It was like 51, 52 where I was at before. Coming to this pocket, the other day, this was mid-50s. It's 48 this morning. So the warmer water is being pushed across. We're going to go get on the windy side Now, if you get a huge wind, that starts to push like main lake water in there and will warm up places. Unless it's a really long flat cove, then it kind of pulls up. But you get a gentle, moderate wind, 5 to 10 mile per hour, the pockets that have the breeze blowing in them is going to push that warm water in there, and it can spike the water temperature of areas like 5 to 10 degrees. And in the spring, when one spot's 48 and the other spot's 58, I mean, that's a game changer. It's dead on the one side and they're busting shad, chasing all over on the other. Definitely pay attention to wind direction. We're gonna do that now. See, the other side here is more open. This isn't a really deep cove, it's kind of flat in the middle. See, there's bank grass up here like that. A lot of times they'll spawn right in the edge of it, or they'll feed right along the side of it. As long as you get, 6 inches or more on the side, and there's almost a foot on the side of it, so you can parallel that, you can throw up there. Not many lay down as much wood or anything, so I feel like with the wind blowing in here, a little bit of kind of stained water, light muddy, this is the spot I'm just going to haul butt down here going with the wind, cover water. You can pick up a random fish or two, sometimes a big one. Not usually a collection, but if you start to figure it out, you can do this in a lot of spots. But the water should be warmer in the back. The wind's gently pushing in the back here. Maybe we'll find a collection in the back. You see there's some brush and willows in the back, so we have that option. But nothing that I'm going to sit and really pick apart here unless there's one big beautiful laydown or something. Cover water, see if we can find a couple. Look at all the beaver work and all these pine trees in here. If you ever handle pine, you get pine tar in your hands. I mean, it's impossible to get off. It's so nasty, so sticky. Can you imagine eating that and having pine tar on your teeth and in your throat? I mean, it's just got to coat your whole throat. Ugh. God, that's nasty. God dang. I guess beaver teeth. I guess chewing on all that sap made him bite. That's a pretty decent one. We hadn't had a bite in a long time, and all of a sudden here we get out of that cold water. The water's about 3-4 degrees warmer. I started seeing shad here. The wind blowing made a difference in spring. Like I said, I was starting to wonder if it was going to happen, but you're always just one little move or one little spot away from catching them. Man, almost a 10-pounder. 9 pounds and 37 ounces. Wow. That bite's pretty cool. I came up and over that lay down pine tree there at the beaver drop for me, and I saw as that bait was coming over the top, I saw the fish, here's my bait, and I see just this giant mouth come out there. And I can't even remember if I paused it or whatever, but usually you just pull it away from it, and I just got it. I'm not sure I even set the hook when I felt it. I just kind of like out of instinct set it, but sometimes it works out. Holy crap, dude, I got that one. Fish in the tree, I thought it broke off. Or snagged, I mean. Still got my mouth. That fish was on down there. Ugh. Oh, jig. I'm throwing a bladed jig with the creature hog in the back. Had that last one, then I'm flipping it too, trying to put it into the cover. That whole creature hog is flat. It likes to skip, and instead of a whole lot of action tail, it gets more of a glide. You get a coast to it instead of just that straight down drop. Got that one just right in the middle of a tree. I would say the place you most have to put it is where you least want to put it, and sure enough, that fish right in the heart of that thing, and Ugh, felt pretty good. And the very backs like this, sometimes when it warms up, as far back as you can go, they'll be way back here, and multiple ones and a great big one. Usually though, you see like shad flicking around and stuff, or if there's water running in from rain, it's dead back here today. The water's a little warmer, it looks so pretty. I mean, there's enough laydowns and stuff, there's better cover here. You notice the game plan was coming into this cove, cover water pretty quickly, and I said, hey, you can catch isolated ones here, but don't spend too much time. And sure enough, you know, we roll down there, and then there's a couple lay down trees there in one little spot, and then I catch that good one and lose another one. And then I kind of slow down and working the stuff over, and that's the trap you get in. Isolated cover like this, keep working quickly. The active ones are the ones that are there. They're not getting much pressure. They're usually active. First cast or two, you're going to get them. You slow down, you're wasting your time. You're better off running a lot more of this water than really picking it apart. And some of this stuff I say to help share what I'm doing with you, help teach a little bit. Other times like that, it's more me telling myself, hey dummy, remember what you said? You were gonna cover water and just pick off a random one. There's only gonna be randoms and kind of spread out. Sometimes I don't listen to my own advice. I have to remind myself. Oh. Those bites are so light. Fish, you're swimming your bait towards the boat. You have a short line making these accurate casts, and then they hit it. They're following bait, so they come right at you. I have an 8-to-1 reel. It's tough to catch up to them, and that fish had it there. It's a light bait. I'm making up time. It about pulls the rod out of my hand, and then I lose them because I can't keep tension on it. And it's the easiest way to catch it, or easiest way to lose them. They come right at you, and you're never really getting a hook in them. They're pushing it towards you, and you can't really pick up that slack. But part of it. These great big laydowns, you know they hold a fish. There's a beaver dam there too. You know there's a fish in there. The problem is there's 8,000 places they could hide, so it's like good and bad. There's probably multiple ones in there. But man, it's just hard to cover. You have to pick it apart. Whereas if it's smaller laydowns and stuff, there's only a couple pitches in there, and you either spook the fish out or you catch them. So it's worth picking apart these big ones. And this one, we're only in 4 feet at the very end. We're, I don't know, 40, 50 feet off the bank. And a lot of it's like 2 and 3 feet, so they could be anywhere. If the ends of it's out, comes down into 15, 20 feet of water in the spring, I'm less worried about it. I'm just going to fish the bank part of it. But here, it's at the very end of a pocket. They could be anywhere in here. So, good problem to have, I guess. But man, you got to fish it and fish it. This is a Berkeley flipping jig. You can see it has like a flat, broad head on it. And then I put this is a creature hog in the back. You see this whole thing's flat. So I have a flat surface here. You can skip this thing so far back in. I like using it on the back of a bladed jig in the springtime. It makes it glide a little more with the jig or the bladed jig. And it just, you know, it kind of feathers up above them. You can just make it kind of like doing the dolphin out the window when you're going down the highway and you got your hand out doing the dolphin. But anyway, totally lost my track. But anyway, you can do the dolphin with your bait, and you can just skip it in there so quietly, put it in there, and drop it right on. When they're in 6 inches of water, 2 feet, like even a nice pitch, when it comes straight down, it's dropping right on them. When it skips across, that's like a bluegill or a minnow like scurrying away, trying to get away there. Just more natural to me. And that flat side on the head, plus that creature hog, makes it so easy to skip it and flip it back in. That's what I'm talking about with the jig. With the creature hog as a trailer and that Berkeley flipping jig with that flat head, that flat bait, he just laid it in there. Of course, that's the buck. Probably female in there somewhere, but I mean that, you can just feather it in there. Even with choppy surface like that, it just skips so good. Quietly put it back where they live, yank him out. Oh God. Oh, it happens. They pull a snag right at you. Oh, incoming. Okay. Ate it too. Oh jig. It says not big. I'll be honest, I don't know what that one came on. It's just muddy bank here, and there's all sorts of good timber right before that. It was flip up here and got that one. I've been alternating between a bladed jig with the creature hog on the back and then a jig. And it seems like today they're back in it. Yesterday they weren't in it as much, maybe because it's a little bit colder. But today putting that jig tighter into the cover is getting a few more bites. Although the bigger ones seem like they bite that bladed jig. You know, it's kind of moving there. It's like the big ones are just outside the cover and there's more fish in the cover. The males are setting up to spawn, but I don't know, it seems like to get bit I have to keep throwing that jig. The problem is you have to slow down, pick stuff apart, where if you can go bladed jig or spinnerbait, something like that, you just cover more water. But you gotta do what you gotta do. Oh, I was just starting to doubt the jig. I get a female. Flipped it in there, saw that one boil. It was for the boil, might not even know how to fish. Just toilet flushed it, got it. Man, it's tough being 7'4". All these fish look small. I mean, it only looks like a 4-pounder when it's actually 11:48. How about that? It's going to be well into the afternoon. Water didn't come up a whole lot. You can see it's actually not getting sunny and warm today. It's getting cloudier. It's going to rain tonight and tomorrow. So the water's warming up a whole lot, but the shad are moving back in the creeks. I see a lot more shad activity back here, flicking on the surface, see them on the graphs and stuff. And obviously the activity has gone from just catching them at the front to catching some of the very, very backs now. So got a window through the end of the day here where it seems like fish are up, a little bit active, not tons of them, but you know, there's some pushing back in the creek here. So time to, instead of really picking stuff apart, we're going to speed up a little bit. They're in these laydowns, but not many of them, in bushes. So just hit as many as I can. I'm using the jig. Seems like that's working a little better. Might go back to the bladed jig, but that jig, skipping in there, I'm working it pretty quick through there. And I'm not picking all apart, like hitting the main section. So a few casts each one and moving on. God. Jump that, set that one up and over the limb, then fight him over it and set him up and over it. Looks like a female. Got a little belly on it, but Fun hook set. Only 9 pounds though. That one got deported and forcibly evicted. I don't know how you phrase that one, but he had to evacuate the premises and he was escorted out. A couple things seen today is definitely the hardwoods. There's all these bushes, but like the laydowns, the actual trees seem like they're holding fish better than the bushes are, or the willows. And then this windy side again, it's a little warmer, and windy side definitely seems there's more shad and a lot more activity. There's a blue heron right in the bushes right over here, looking for shad, I guess, too. Sure sign that the bait's up here. Ah. Ran him off, just like the bass. Throw back in there because that's obviously the male. That's baby bass. There's that female. That's where having a really long rod helps you. That fish I pitched up there in the laydown, and all of a sudden I lose contact with it. By the time I figure out what's going on, I mean, he's almost to the boat. This is 7.5 extra fast action rod, so I was able to recover and still set the hook and get control of that fish. You have enough leverage, or enough, you move enough line and catch up to that slack. This is a 10-to-1 Revo rocket, so I can pick up a lot of slack, and then it's 7.5 rod. I can move a lot of line too. That was enough to catch up to him. That one was a dink, but a lot of times those big females do the same thing. They grab it and they swim to the safety of deeper water, I guess, or away from their buddy. They try to get out to safety and they just streak out of there. So all that to say, all this high-end gear got me a 1-pound fish. But hey, I'll take it. A buck showing up in the back of these pockets. They're in the laydowns, the big hardwoods. Come back here in a couple days, you'll be able to catch females, surely. Warms up, and all of a sudden when you flip in there, it'll be a great big one. But you definitely know the places that they're going to spawn. They're just not, females aren't in here yet.